Hi, I'm Hanna Flint, and I'm here at the Hope 93 Gallery with the amazing activist, world-renowned photographer, and Oscar-nominated director, Misan Harriman.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So great to be here because this is the Purpose of Light exhibition that you've had on for about a year now, right?
Yeah.
And this kind of is such a perfect place to talk about Shoot the People.
Absolutely.
Which is a documentary directed by Andy Mundy-Castle. And it follows you around the world, exploring campaigns, grassroots movements, and also the history of how photos have been used as resistance. So just tell me the origin story about how this documentary came about.
It's interesting because usually for Black artists, you have to be dead for a feature-length documentary to be made about you. I'm Not Your Negro, James Baldwin, we'd already lost him. Choice of Weapons, Gordon Parks, and of course, last year, Ernest Cole. And there have been many documentaries made about living white artists. So when the opportunity came about, I had just seen White Nanny, Black Child by Andy Mundy-Castle, and it's a masterpiece. He won a BAFTA for it. And I was like, if that guy is interested in helping me tell my story whilst I'm still here, it would be such a perfect opportunity. He's a son of the soil, Nigerian British like me. And I basically entrusted my life to this auteur's hands, and the rest is history.
I think it's interesting about documentary because when you're involved in it and you're the subject, there's also an element of how candid can you be and how much do you want to share? Because, you know, you have family, you have Camilla, your wife, you have your kids. So I guess, what were the conversations that you had to decide how much we want to put in about your background, your upbringing, and I guess, you know, and how that relates to the stories that you're telling through the photos you take?
Yeah, it's a dance because, you know, you have to show who you are in order for people to be immersed in your story. But that all goes back to the director and the grace he had in trying to find my truth whilst protecting my family and my young kids, which I think he did really beautifully.
As someone who is always behind the lens, how is it being in front of the camera?
Odd. I mean, obviously I made a film a few years ago, and I was deeply involved in every aspect of that. And I had to let go. You know, I didn't have final cut. I didn't get involved in the editing. The music was all, I mean, Andy did it. He did the thing. And I think if you're going to collaborate with a filmmaker, then let him be the filmmaker, and then you just have to focus on being you. And that's exactly what happened.
So obviously I think because you have so many connections, people love you, and you have, what I love about your work is that, you know, if I look around here, you'll see people like Greta Thunberg, you'll see Nadia Sawalha, but you'll see unknown people, people
Denise
civilians.
Goff.
Right, Denise Goff, you'll see all these people. And so I wonder, like, how has it been navigating something where you have done the first Black man to do a cover for British Vogue? You've done, I've seen the pictures you've done at premieres and campaigns, but then I guess balancing out with your activism work where you are shooting the people.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could have stayed on yachts and red carpets and had a fabulous life, probably earned a ton of money photographing vacuous celebrity, right? And I say vacuous celebrity because, yes, we have some famous people on these walls, but they are the opposite of vacuous. They have shown us who they really are. A big chunk, you and I both work in the film industry, and we're both heartbroken by the silence during so much violence in this world. And as a child of empire, as I became more successful, that whisper that probably came from my ancestors saying, it ain't enough to be a world famous celebrity photographer, you need to bear witness. You know, and I was always moved by the images of early Cecil Beaton during the Blitz, or Gordon Parks, or Eve Arnold, amazing, you know, photojournalism. And how can you hold a camera, have a platform, and not point it to where humanity needs when the world's on fire?
Yeah.
How could I do that? I think the question is, how is anyone else being silent if they have the ability even to change one mind?
Yeah.
So I'm doing what I can with the tools that I have.
Yeah, I think Ta-Nehisi Coates talked about, like, if you're a writer, why are you not writing about this? It just feels so important. And I guess from this documentary, you're traveling across, you're not just, speaking to Martin Luther King the third, you're talking to reps like Ilhan Omar. But what was the things that you kind of noticed in these different communities?
I think going to 3 continents to look at protest and understanding the history going as far back as women's rights with the suffragettes, who were of course called terrorists. Youth was a clear through line. The youth, I'm so flipping proud of our young people. And I mean, I've met young people in Johannesburg, Minnesota, where George Floyd was lynched, and of course in London and Barcelona. And there's something about youth that gets lost as the world gets hold of you, that is the very thing we should be holding on to. And I think all of us oldies should be ashamed of ourselves. And it is true that student movements, whether it's Tiananmen Square or what happened in Colombia, or Vietnam, they've never been on the wrong side of history. So I noticed that was a through line. And the other thing that I noticed is that one singular voice matters. If you watch this film, that's the thing I think I would love you to take away, that your voice, as you leave the theater, that your voice is much more than a whisper, because you become part of the community that makes a roar. Yeah. And that's what our fourth estate is ruining the world by trying to keep us on islands of rage, islands of mis and disinformation. That's why journalists are being killed more than we've ever recorded. That's why health workers, there's no more oncology treatment in Gaza, which means if you have cancer, you're dead. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, I think the idea of the photo or the image is shooting truth to power. But then I think about that old adage, if a tree falls in the forest and no one saw it, did it actually happen? So I think is that the sort of kind of understanding of what you're doing? It's like we need to document this, and through looking back at history, which you do in the documentary, is like how the revolution has to be televised.
Otherwise, the monsters would tell us a history that never happened.
Yeah.
And Orwell said it best, the party will ask you to reject what you see with your eyes and hear with your ears. It is a final and most essential command. And I'm looking at you, but behind you, there's an image I've taken saying, this is bigger than your career, right above your head. And it's keeping me strong, because it is. It's an existential threat to all of us. If we allow the Overton window to move to the point where we will sit at cafes scrolling through charred corpses of babies, and that doesn't even move, and you move on to someone dancing in the living room, and you're like, that's great. Oh, dead baby. Yeah, that's great. Hey, are we going to Ibiza this summer? Yeah. If that is allowed to be normalized, then Homo sapiens are a failed species, full stop. So what do we do to stop that? We make sure that empathy is watered. It's like a plant. Man, and I use the term man because it really is patriarchy that is the engine room of all of this, is capable of doing things that the devil will be ashamed of. But it is also capable, usually with the help of matriarchy, of rebuilding, of nurturing, of giving life instead of taking life. And that's the direction of travel I want the community that I'm part of to keep growing.
Yeah, and I think there's an element of you are a Black man, but your focus on your activism isn't limited to your personal community. I wonder if you can talk to me a little about inter-community activism and support.
The amount of Arab men and women that have come into this gallery and wept, and they've looked me in the eyes and they said, you're not even from our community and you care. Yeah. And I was like, well, I feel I am part of your community, because if you go back far enough, we were very much cut from the same cloth. And the binary nature of Western colonialism has, through Sykes-Picot and so many other decisions made.
Arbitrary lines
drawn. Those lines that destroy ancient legacies and poetry and science and culture have made us, and that's one of the reasons I think I am probably quite a big target, because as a Black voice, I'm able to bring the Black community together with the Muslim, South Asian, Arab community, with progressive white people and Jewish people to form a coalition of hope that certain people are not crazy about.
Well, yeah, this is the one thing, you have such a big platform, but we've seen so many times those who are vocal about Palestine or speak out have been targeted, whether it's Susan Sarandon, Melissa Barrera, and you yourself most recently have been the victim of a smear campaign when you are calling a spade a spade. How does that feel? And I guess what's been wonderful for you to see, even in the face of people trying to tear you down and paint a false narrative of where you stand and what you believe in, what has been important to you in this moment?
I mean, Matt Kelly, the editor of the New World, I think, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said it is the most stunning contortion of truth he has seen in his 40 years as a journalist in the UK. It's quite a thing for a journalist to say. And, Matt D'Ancona, who was editor of The Spectator, which is not politically on my side of the fence, said it was disgusting. So they've gone pretty far with me. And the first thing I'll say is there is no pillow as soft as a clear conscience. I am not the person that's harming the people that I care about, even though the language used by the press, you would think that I'm dropping bombs on people or controlling drones that are snipering tents. My job is to build the bridges that have been broken by the very pillars that were supposed to keep us together. And if that's a crime, then I'm guilty. I believe that there must never be children or humans of a lesser God. And as I look at you now with your heritage, even if I hadn't met you, you can look at someone and you can feel the lines of their colonial past. And I think we've all come closer. You and I, we met briefly before, but we've connected because we're in a state of perpetual trauma. But also hope lives when you realize that that is not going to define us. It almost broke our parents and our parents' parents. We have this thing called the internet and a voice and the ability to unlearn and build community. I have to be able to look my children in the face to tell them that I tried. And that isn't just Gaza, that's the climate crisis, which none of us can escape from.
We felt this heat wave.
It's real. And, also the equivalent of 6 Hiroshimas in terms of explosive power has been dropped on Gaza. You think that's not adding to the ecological crisis that we have? They tell us not to use plastic straws and then they're dropping how many kilotons of, we need to just get real with the reality that beyond just the violence of the machinery of war, what it's doing to our planet is probably more harmful in industry than everything, including fossil fuels. It's definitely up there. And everyone talks about fossil fuels, not war, because war, it's kind of like when you meet someone, I live in middle-class England, and I meet people who tell me they're in defense. And I was like, you should really change that to I'm in offense. Right? Because the things you're making are not defending anyone. They're ripping children apart. And they're highly I'm in profitable offense is what should be used.
And then in the meantime, there are issues with the NHS and homelessness and things that are at home.
America's worse because people are setting up GoFundMes, people with diabetes, to get insulin. And I read that at the height of what was happening with Iran, $2 billion a day was being spent on munitions and fueling. Let that sink in. GoFundMes for insulin, $2 billion a day spent on violence.
I saw something obviously it's the World Cup at the moment, and someone said, you look at all the countries that are playing, and this is being taken place in the US. The US is the only one that doesn't offer any sort of universal healthcare. Every other country has some form of that.
Some form of healthcare.
Well, I want to talk about, the society we're in, where we're at now. Obviously, I feel like more people than ever are talking about these issues and people feel more switched on. We've got Andy Burnham coming in. We've had politicians, we've seen Zohran Mamdani across the pond. He's a very inspiring figure. What's your thoughts about how, I guess, politicians in the UK could be making a difference? And is it still not enough when it comes to, we have all these people talking out against what's going on. We have protests, we have marches, but ultimately, unless
the
politicians do something about it, how are you feeling about?
Well, it's interesting because the Democratic Party is learning hard and fast that Gaza is the central issue in US politics. And if you look at the new wave of democratic socialists that are winning with ease now, that have very clear points of view on the universal health care, taxing the hyper wealthy, and of course the agreement that there is a genocide that is being funded by tax dollars that nobody wants to talk about, that must be spoken about. I think that point of view will, if there is a talent that comes through in the UK, whether Zach Polanski and or others, that is very clear that they want, most socialist things are good for all of us, right? Like universal health care, the ability for people to have a system that looks after, whether it's transport, all the things that regular people need to feel like that the hours they're putting into their work is seen in the state that they're working in. I think that's a really easy sell for most people. And the other really easy sell is that most people don't want bombs to be the only solution to groups of people disagreeing. And if someone is clear, and I'm not getting into politics, that can articulate that to a broad church of people, change will happen very, very fast.
Yeah, and I guess kind of final thing I want to talk about is you, again, going back to that idea of photos are truth. But we're in a world now with AI where the truth of a photo can be called into question. Yeah. As a photographer, how do you feel about this?
Two things. This is why this is so important. It took us a lot of effort to get these printed. These are museum grade prints. And what I love about when you finally print an image is that no one can change it.
Yeah.
And one day, some billionaire could wake up and look at all my viral posts online saying, and every picture that I've ever posted could just disappear. And I mean disappear from Google search, Meta, Instagram, Facebook, just disappear. You can't do this to real images. And, I believe that actually the traditional still image hung up in the way that it's hung up, whether it's in a home or in a museum or a gallery, is going to become more important than what you see that the algorithm pushes to you, which is why sacred spaces like this, and you've been here many times, mean so much to so many people. I also think with AI, it's interesting because I have a huge archive of the anti-Zionist Jewish movement, like we have over there with Stephen Kaposh and Agnes. And the only time I get lots of bots that say all sorts of awful things about me online, but every time I post an image of an anti-Zionist Jewish person or peoples in protest, within 35 seconds, I get 50 comments saying, that's AI.
Yeah.
That's not real. So the machinery of this mis and disinformation is really interesting in how it works for making truth questionable, but also for reminding us that if the still image didn't matter, they wouldn't respond in the way that they did, which is why I'm going to hopefully travel around the world with this show to remind us that we were there and we're doing what we can with the tools that we have.
Yeah. So Purpose of Light is here at the Hope 93 Gallery.
Yeah.
Shoot the People is out on July 10th.
Yes.
Misan Harriman, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.